Dozens of cities mentioned in the Bible have completely vanished from the face of the earth. Some were buried under sand, others swallowed by water. A few were so thoroughly erased that archaeologists spent centuries just trying to figure out where they once stood. So today, we are going to walk through every major biblical location that no longer exists and explain exactly what happened to each one. Let us start with the most famous destruction in all of Scripture, Sodom and Gomorrah. These two cities appear in Genesis as places of extreme wickedness. God tells Abraham that the outcry against Sodom is so great and their sin so grievous that judgment is coming. Abraham bargains with God, asking if he would spare the city for 50 righteous people, then 45, then 40, all the way down to 10. But there are not even 10. So God sends 2 angels to Sodom, and what happens next confirms the diagnosis. The men of the city surround Lot's house, demanding the visitors be handed over. The angels strike the mob with blindness and tell Lot to get his family out immediately. The next morning, fire and sulfur rain down from the sky. Both cities are completely annihilated, along with the surrounding plain. Lot's wife looks back and becomes a pillar of salt. By the time Abraham looks toward the region the following morning, all he sees is dense smoke rising like a furnace. So where did Sodom and Gomorrah actually go? For centuries, scholars assumed the cities lay beneath the southern end of the Dead Sea. The logic made sense. The Dead Sea sits in a geological rift zone. The region is rich in bitumen, sulfur deposits, and salt formations. Ancient writers like Josephus and Strabo mentioned ruins visible near the Dead Sea in their times, but nobody could pinpoint the exact spot. Then in 2005, archaeologists began excavating a site called Tal el Hammam in Jordan, just northeast of the Dead Sea. What they found was staggering. A massive Bronze Age city, one of the largest in the southern Levant, that was suddenly and violently destroyed around 1650 BC. The destruction layer contained trinitite-like glass, melted pottery, and shocked quartz. These are the same signatures found at nuclear test sites. The temperatures required to produce this kind of damage exceed anything ancient warfare could generate. In 2021, a peer-reviewed study published in the journal Scientific Reports proposed that a cosmic airburst, likely an asteroid exploding in the atmosphere, destroyed the city in an instant. The heat flash would have been immediate. The shockwave would have flattened every structure. Salt from the Dead Sea would have been blasted across the farmland, rendering it infertile for centuries. Not every scholar agrees that Tal el Hammam is Sodom. Other candidates include Bab ed Hesh Dra and Numira, further south near the Dead Sea. But what is clear is this: the cities of the plain were real. They were destroyed suddenly and catastrophically. And today, nothing remains but scorched earth, salt, and silence. Now, from divine judgment in Genesis, we move forward to conquest in Joshua, and to a city whose very name means ruin. The city of Ai appears in Joshua chapters 7 and 8. After the miraculous fall of Jericho, Israel moves to take a small city called Ai. Joshua sends a few thousand men expecting an easy victory, but Israel is routed. 36 men die, and the army retreats in fear. Joshua falls on his face before God, confused. God reveals the problem. A man named Achan has stolen devoted items from Jericho, bringing guilt on the entire camp. So the sin is dealt with, and God tells Joshua to try again, this time with a clever ambush strategy. Joshua sets an ambush behind the city, lures the defenders out, then signals the hidden force to rush in and set the city on fire. The king of Ai is captured and hanged. The city is burned to the ground and left as a permanent ruin. But here is the puzzle. The Hebrew word A literally means the ruin. So even in the text, this place is being described as something already destroyed. This has led to enormous archaeological debate. The traditional identification is a site called Et Tel, about 2 miles east of Bethel. But Et Tel presents a major problem. It was destroyed around 2400 BC, over 1,000 years before Joshua's conquest. There is no significant occupation layer during the time period most scholars assign to Joshua. So either the dating is wrong, the identification is wrong, or something else is going on. A rival candidate emerged in 1995 when archaeologist Bryant Wood began excavating Khirbet el Makatir, about a kilometre west of Et Tel. This site fits the biblical description better in several ways. It is smaller than Et Tel, matching the text's description of Ai as a minor city. It has a gate facing north, consistent with the narrative, and it shows a destruction layer dating to the Late Bronze Age. Wood argued this was the real Eye until his death in 2021. Others have proposed that the name itself is the clue. Perhaps Eye was already a ruin that had been briefly reoccupied, and Joshua destroyed the squatters living among older ruins. Whatever the case, the city was never rebuilt in any meaningful way. It became exactly what its name says, a heap of stones in the Judean hills. You can visit these sites today and find nothing but archaeology. The city Joshua burned stayed burned. From Ai, we move to a much larger prize. Hazor was the largest city in Canaan during the Bronze Age. Joshua 11 describes how Israel faced a massive coalition of northern kings, led by Jabin, king of Hazor. These armies gathered near the waters of Merom with horses and chariots, a force designed to crush Israel. But God told Joshua not to be afraid. Israel attacked suddenly, routed the coalition, and chased the survivors across the region. Then Joshua turned back and captured Hazor itself. The text says he burned it with fire, and specifically notes that Hazor had been the head of all those kingdoms. So what happened to Hazor? Unlike Ai, we know exactly where it was. Tel Hazor sits in northern Israel, in the Upper Galilee region. Excavations beginning in the 1950s under Yigael Yadin revealed a city of enormous scale. At its peak, Hazor covered about 200 acres, making it roughly 10 times the size of Jerusalem during the same period. It had a massive palace, temples, and extensive fortifications. The destruction layer is dramatic. Thick ash, toppled statues with their heads deliberately smashed, and evidence of intense burning. The Canaanite temples were specifically targeted and demolished. Yadin dated this destruction to the 13th century BC and attributed it to the Israelite conquest. Some scholars dispute the exact date, but the violence of the destruction is undeniable. Hazor was later partially rebuilt during the time of Solomon. 1 Kings 9 mentioned Solomon fortifying Hazor along with Megiddo and Giza. But the Solomonic city was far smaller, occupying only the upper Tel rather than the full lower city. Then, in 732 BC, the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III conquered the region and destroyed Hazor for the final time. After that, it was never rebuilt. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Tourists walk among the ruins of a city that was once the mightiest in all Canaan, now reduced to excavated foundations and information plaques. Now we move to the coast, and to one of the most dramatic fulfillments of prophecy in ancient history. Tyre was a Phoenician port city, wealthy beyond imagination. It appears throughout the Old Testament, sometimes as an ally and sometimes as a target of prophetic judgment. King Hiram of Tyre supplied cedar wood and skilled craftsmen for Solomon's temple. But by the time of Ezekiel, the relationship had soured. Tyre had become arrogant, exploitative, and hostile toward Israel. So in Ezekiel chapter 26, God pronounces a devastating and oddly specific judgment. He says, "Many nations will come against Tyre. Her walls will be broken down, her towers demolished, her debris scraped away until she becomes bare rock." He says she will become a place for spreading fishing nets in the midst of the sea. Here is what makes this prophecy remarkable. Ancient Tyre had two parts, a mainland settlement and an island fortress about half a mile offshore. When Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon besieged Tyre starting around 586 BC, he spent 13 years grinding down the mainland city, but the inhabitants simply relocated to the island. Nebuchadnezzar could not reach them. He destroyed the mainland portion, but the island stood defiant. So the mainland became rubble. For over 2 centuries it sat there, a heap of broken stone and dust. Then Alexander the Great arrived in 332 BC. He demanded Tyre's surrender. The island city refused. So Alexander did something no one thought possible. He took the ruins of old mainland Tyre and literally scraped them into the sea to build a causeway, called a mole, extending out to the island. He scraped the old city down to bare rock and used every stone, every timber, every piece of debris as fill material. Then he assaulted the island and destroyed it completely. Ezekiel's prophecy was fulfilled in specific detail. Many nations came. The stones were thrown into the water. The site was scraped to bare rock. Today, the causeway still exists. Centuries of sand accumulation have widened it into a permanent land bridge. The modern city of Sur in Lebanon sits on this spit of land. But ancient Tyre, the proud island fortress, is gone. Fishermen literally spread their nets on the rocks where it once stood. The precision of this fulfillment is difficult to dismiss. From the Phoenician coast, we travel east to the banks of the Tigris River, to a city that terrorized the ancient world. Nineveh was the capital of the Assyrian Empire, one of the most feared civilizations in human history. The Assyrians perfected cruelty as a military strategy. They impaled captives on stakes, skinned prisoners alive, and relocated entire populations to break their will. Nineveh itself was massive, surrounded by walls stretching nearly 8 miles in circumference, adorned with monumental architecture, and fed by an advanced aqueduct system. At its height, it may have housed over 100,000 people. The prophet Nahum wrote an entire book predicting Nineveh's destruction. He described flooding, fire, and military siege. He declared that the city would be so thoroughly destroyed that those who heard of its fall would clap their hands because everyone had suffered under Assyria's endless cruelty. In 612 BC, it happened. A coalition of Babylonians, Medes, and Scythians attacked. Ancient sources and archaeological evidence both indicate that flooding played a role. The Tigris River or its tributaries may have breached the walls during the siege, allowing the invaders in. The city was sacked and burned. The population was scattered. But here is what makes Nineveh's story so striking. After its fall, the city did not merely decline. It vanished completely. Within a few generations, no one could point to it on a map. By the time the Greek historian Xenophon marched past the site in 401 BC, roughly 200 years after its destruction, he did not even know what the mounds were. He attributed them to a different people entirely. For over 2,000 years, Nineveh lay buried under dirt mounds near the Tigris. Skeptics actually used its disappearance to argue the Bible was fictional. They said a city that large could not simply vanish without a trace. Then, in the 1840s, Austin Henry Layard began excavating the mounds across from the city of Mosul in modern Iraq. What he found stunned the world. Massive stone reliefs, cuneiform tablets, the palace of Sennacherib, the very king who besieged Jerusalem in Hezekiah's time. Nineveh was real. It was exactly where the Bible said it was. And it was exactly as destroyed as Nahum said it would be. Today, the site faces another threat. In 2015, ISIS deliberately bulldozed portions of the ruins and smashed artifacts from the Mosul Museum. The city that disappeared once is being erased again. From the Tigris, we follow the Euphrates south to the most famous city in the ancient world. Babylon appears in the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. It is the city of Babel where human pride first tried to reach heaven. It is the empire that destroyed Jerusalem and took God's people into exile. And in Revelation, it becomes a symbol of every system that opposes God. But Babylon was also a real physical place, and its story of decline is one of the slowest vanishing acts in history. At its peak under Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon was staggering. The Ishtar Gate, with its glazed blue bricks. The Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. A ziggurat so massive it may have inspired the Tower of Babel story. Walls so thick that chariots could race along the top. The city straddled the Euphrates and dominated the region for decades. But the prophet said it would fall. Isaiah chapters 13 and 14 declared that Babylon would be overthrown like Sodom and Gomorrah, but it would never be inhabited again, that wild animals would live among its ruins. Jeremiah chapters 50 and 51 repeated and expanded the prophecy. Babylon would become a desolation, a dry land, a wilderness where no one dwells. In 539 BC, the Persian king Cyrus conquered Babylon, but he did not destroy it. He simply walked in after his forces diverted the Euphrates and entered under the walls. For centuries afterward, Babylon continued to exist as a city. Alexander the Great made it his capital and planned massive renovations before dying there in 323 BC. After his death, his successors founded new cities nearby, particularly Seleucia on the Tigris. Population slowly drained away from Babylon. By the 1st century AD, it was mostly empty. By the 7th century, the site was abandoned entirely. Today, ancient Babylon is an archaeological site about 55 miles south of Baghdad in Iraq. Saddam Hussein attempted to rebuild portions of it in the 1980s, constructing replica walls and a palace on a hill overlooking the ruins. But his additions are crumbling too. The original structures are mud brick eroding in the desert. The Euphrates River has shifted course, and and no longer runs through the city as it once did. Wild animals do live among the ruins, as Isaiah said they would. No permanent population lives on the ancient site. The prophecies of total desolation took centuries to fully materialize, but they did. Now we turn to the New Testament, and to 3 small towns whose destruction Jesus himself predicted. In Matthew chapter 11 and Luke chapter 10, Jesus pronounces judgment on 3 Galilean cities where he performed many of his miracles: Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum. They saw his works up close. They witnessed power no other generation had received, but they did not repent. So Jesus said it would be more bearable for Tyre and Sidon on the day of judgment than for them. He said Capernaum, exalted to heaven, would be brought down to Hades. Chorazin was located about 2 miles north of the Sea of Galilee in the Basalt Hills. We know almost nothing about what Jesus did there specifically. The Gospels mention it only in the context of this judgment saying, but clearly significant miracles occurred within its borders. After the 1st century, the city continued for a while. A synagogue was built there in the 3rd or 4th century, the remains of which still stand, but eventually the population disappeared. By the medieval period, Chorazin was deserted. Today it is Chorazim National Park. Tourists can walk among the black basalt ruins of a synagogue and scattered buildings, but no one lives there. The city Jesus condemned has been empty for over 1,000 years. Bethsaida sits right at the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, near where the Jordan River enters the lake. It was the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip. Jesus healed a blind man there. He fed 5,000 people nearby, yet the city rejected his message. After Jesus pronounced judgment, Bethsaida's fate becomes one of archaeology's great mysteries. The problem is that no one can agree on where Bethsaida actually was. For decades, the leading candidate was a site called Et Tel, a mound about 1.5 miles from the current shoreline. But scholars struggled with this identification because the name Bethsaida means house of fishing, and Et Tel seems too far from the water. Then, in 2017, excavations at a site called El Araj, right on the shoreline, revealed Roman period remains that some archaeologists believe is the real Bethsaida. The site had been buried under meters of sediment deposited by the Jordan River over centuries. So what happened to Bethsaida? The lake's shoreline shifted. The Jordan deposited enormous amounts of silt. Earthquakes may have altered the landscape. The fishing village that watched Jesus perform miracles was literally buried. Whether it is Et Tel, sitting high and dry on a hill far from water, or El Araj, submerged beneath sediment, the result is the same. The city vanished so completely that we cannot even agree on which pile of ruins it was. Capernaum is the most significant of the 3. Jesus made it his home base for ministry. Matthew 4 says he left Nazareth and went to live in Capernaum. It was where he called his first disciples, healed Peter's mother-in-law, cast out demons in the synagogue, and taught the crowds that gathered around him. More miracles occurred in Capernaum than in almost any other location in the Gospels. But after the 1st century, Capernaum slowly faded. A small Jewish Christian community persisted for a few centuries. A synagogue was built in the 4th century, possibly over the site of the one where Jesus taught. A church was constructed over what tradition identifies as Peter's house, but by the medieval period, Capernaum was abandoned. The fishing village where God himself walked and taught became empty ruins on the lakeshore. Today, it is a Franciscan archaeological site. Visitors can see the remains of the white limestone synagogue, the octagonal church over Peter's house, and scattered basalt walls. A modern church has been built on stilts directly over the ancient ruins. But Capernaum as a living city is gone. Jesus said it would be brought low. It was. From the Galilee shore we move to the western coast of modern Turkey, where 2 of the most significant early churches eventually disappeared. Ephesus was one of the greatest cities in the Roman world. It had a population that may have reached 250,000. It was home to the Temple of Artemis, another of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. When Paul arrived in Acts chapter 19, the city was thriving. He taught there for over 2 years. His ministry was so effective that silversmiths who made shrines to Artemis started losing business. They rioted. The whole city rushed into the great theatre shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians," for 2 hours straight. Paul wrote his letter to the Ephesians from prison. The book of Revelation includes Ephesus as the first of the 7 churches addressed by Jesus. He commends their hard work and perseverance, but warns that they have forsaken their first love. If they do not repent, he says he will remove their lampstand. So, what happened to Ephesus? The city's harbour was its lifeblood. Ships from across the Mediterranean docked there, bringing trade and wealth. But the Cayster River continuously deposited silt into the harbour. Despite repeated dredging efforts over centuries, the harbour kept filling in. By the Byzantine period, the shoreline had receded significantly. By the medieval period, the harbour was gone entirely. Ships could no longer reach the city. Trade routes shifted. Malaria from the resulting marshland drove away the remaining population. Today, the ruins of Ephesus sit about 4 miles from the Aegean coast. The harbour where Paul once arrived by ship is now farmland. The great theatre where the riot occurred still stands, its 25,000 seats open to the sky. The Temple of Artemis is reduced to a single reconstructed column standing in a swampy field. The city that refused to keep its first love lost its lampstand. And then it lost everything else. 70 miles inland from Ephesus sits another vanished city from Revelation, Laodicea. Jesus had some of his harshest words for this church. You are neither hot nor cold. I wish you were one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. The Laodiceans thought they were rich and needed nothing. Jesus said they were wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. Ancient Laodicea was wealthy, famous for its banking industry, its black wool, and its medical school that produced a renowned eye salve. The irony in Jesus' letter is devastating. He tells the city known for eye medicine that it is blind. He tells the city known for fine clothing that it is naked. He tells the city known for banking wealth that it is poor. The city sat in a region of significant seismic activity. Earthquakes hit repeatedly throughout its history. A major quake in 60 AD destroyed much of the city, but Laodicea was so wealthy it rebuilt without any outside assistance. Tacitus recorded this fact with amazement. But the earthquakes kept coming. Over centuries, the damage accumulated. Water supply became increasingly difficult. The city's famous aqueduct system, which brought lukewarm water from hot springs that cooled during transit, eventually failed. By the 7th century, Arab raids made the region dangerous. By the medieval period, Laodicea was abandoned. The Seljuk Turks controlled the area but built their own cities nearby, like Denizli, rather than rebuilding Laodicea. Today the site is an active archaeological excavation near Denizli, Turkey. You can see the remains of 2 theatres, a stadium, columned streets, and church buildings, but no one has lived there for over 1,000 years. The lukewarm church went cold. Then it went dark. Our final location takes us to the dramatic red cliffs of southern Jordan, the land of Edom and its famous capital carved from stone. Edom was the nation descended from Esau, Jacob's twin brother. Throughout the Old Testament, Edom and Israel had a complicated relationship. Sometimes they cooperated. More often they fought. But the breaking point came when Jerusalem fell to Babylon in 586 BC. The Edomites not only refused to help their cousins, they actively participated in the destruction. They stood at the crossroads cutting down refugees. They looted the city, they handed survivors over to the enemy. The prophet Obadiah wrote about this betrayal. His message is short, but fierce. Because of violence against your brother Jacob, shame will cover you and you will be destroyed forever. The pride of your heart has deceived you, you who live in the clefts of the rocks. Though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down. That phrase about living in the clefts of the rocks points directly to the Edomite strongholds carved into sandstone cliffs. The most famous of these became the city of Petra, later developed by the Nabateans after the Edomites were displaced. Petra became a magnificent trading hub, its facades carved directly into rose-red canyon walls. Thousands lived there. Caravans crossed through bringing spice, silk, and incense. But the prophecy of desolation was not finished. Trade routes gradually shifted. When the Romans annexed the Nabatean kingdom in 106 AD, they favored other routes and other cities. A massive earthquake in 363 AD destroyed much of the water management system that made life possible in the desert. Another quake struck in 551 AD. The population dwindled. By the Crusader period, only a small garrison used the ruins. After that, Petra was lost to the Western world entirely. For centuries, local Bedouins knew about the ruins, but European scholars considered it a lost city. It was rediscovered by Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt in 1812. Today, Petra is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of Jordan's biggest tourist attractions. But no one lives in the ancient city. The elaborate tombs and temples carved into the cliffs are empty. The trading halls are silent. Obadiah said Edom would be destroyed forever. The people who once lived in the clefts of the rocks are gone. Their descendants were absorbed into other populations centuries ago. The cliffs remain. The people do not. So what do all these vanished cities have in common? Each one received a warning. Some received multiple warnings over generations. Nineveh actually repented once in Jonah's day and was spared for over a century, but they returned to brutality. So Nahum delivered the final verdict. Babylon had a slow decline that took hundreds of years to complete. Tyre's geography was physically rearranged in a single military campaign. The Galilean towns faded quietly while the world's attention was elsewhere, but in every case the pattern holds. God spoke, time passed, and then history confirmed every word. Some cities were erased by fire, some by water, some by earthquakes, some simply by the slow accumulation of sand and silt and silence. But none of them survived. The ruins remain as witnesses, scattered across the Middle East and Mediterranean, available for anyone to visit, photograph, and study. These are not myths buried in the distant past. These are coordinates on a map. You can fly to Iraq and walk across the baked mud bricks of Babylon. You can hike through the Red Canyon walls of Petra. You can stand in the theatre at Ephesus where a riot once erupted over the gospel. You can sit on the black basalt stones of Chorazin where Jesus once performed miracles that an entire town shrugged off. Every one of these places tells the same story from a different angle. The God of the Bible is patient. He warns. He waits. He sends messengers, prophets, and in some cases his own son. But there is a line, and when that line is crossed, when repentance is refused, and arrogance takes root, and cruelty goes unchecked, the clock starts counting down. The cities are gone, the prophecies stand, and the ruins keep testifying to anyone willing to look.